The Spanish gun company Star was primarily known for their 1911 clones, the Model A in 9mm Largo and the Model B in 9mm Parabellum, which they made from the 1920s all the way to the 1970s. The Model A and Model B Super Series pistols, introduced after World War II, were much more modern on the inside, but outwardly they still looked like 1911s and still fed from single-column 9mm magazines. Then the wondernine revolution happened in the 1980s. The Beretta 92 was adopted by the US military. Ruger trundled out the P-Series. Smith & Wesson continued making handguns with incomprehensible model names and wondered why nobody but police departments paid any attention to them. And Sig Sauer introduced the P226, a gun that was obsolete as soon as it came off the assembly line for the first time. Every major player in the business of making handguns got on the wondernine train, including Star. Their first attempt was the Model 28, a 15-round double-stack 9mm with a double-action single-action trigger, as was the style at the time. The Model 28 went up against the Beretta 92 in U.S. military handgun trials, but once Star began picking up domestic contracts with Spanish military and police agencies, they stopped chasing that almighty American dollar. The Model 28 uses typical Browning tilting barrel cam-path short recoil, the same system as the Super Series pistols. Barrel and slide lockup is handled with a lug on the top of the barrel hood that interfaces with a cut on the inside of the slide. Very standard stuff. The trigger lockwork is double action single action with a slide mounted ambidextrous safety lever, but no decocker function, at least not at first. One interesting feature of the Model 28 that would be appealing to military buyers is the ability to detail strip the slide without any tools. You can start disassembling the gun without any tools, and as you take parts off the gun, you use them to continue the process. Retract the slide a bit until the takedown indicators line up, then push out the slide stop lever and pull the slide off. Remove the barrel and recoil spring assembly like you would on any pistol. Use the rounded end of the slide stop lever to depress the firing pin and slide off the slide end plate. Now you can remove the firing pin and use that to depress a tiny detent in the right side safety lever, allowing you to slide it off of the main body of the safety. This allows you to remove the safety lever out of the left side of the gun, and that frees up the extractor spring and detent. With the upper details stripped, it's really easy to clean the slide and all the small parts, but man, some of them are really small. And if you did this in the field, there's no way you wouldn't lose the tiny detent that holds the right side safety lever on. The Model 28 was quickly replaced by the slightly updated Model 30, which became the most common version of the gun. The last iteration of the design was the Model 31, which was a more comprehensive update of the pistol, and seems to have been aimed more towards the export market. All of these guns were available in multiple configurations as indicated by the letters at the end of the model name. The M designation was for the original full-size military version. The P designation is for the police version with a shorter barrel and slide. The K designation indicates a lightweight alloy frame. As far as I know, the full-size version was never offered with the alloy frame, so typically what you see is a mixture of Ms, Ps, and PKs. There are some other strange model numbers that have no functional differences, but indicate they were made for foreign militaries or other markets. Some Model 30s are marked as Model MI, and some of those seem to have been imported with the additional moniker Starfire added. A Model 30 MI Starfire is still just a Model 30M, but it's a really fucking cool roll mark to have. These are the two examples I've got of the 28, 30, 31 series. This one is a Model 30 PK. This one is a surplus pistol, either Spanish military or police, or perhaps more likely Israeli police, that was imported by PW Arms in Redmond, Washington, after the end of its usable life. We'll talk about that in a little bit. This one is a Model 31P. This one was one of the original pistols imported by Interarms in the 90s. Both of these are the police model, meaning they have the shorter slide and barrel. The 30 PK is the alloy-framed version, and the 31P is steel-framed and has the Starvel electroless nickel finish. Mechanically, these guns are nearly identical. The only major change the pistols underwent during the entire series was the addition of a decocker function to the Model 31s. The Models 28 and 30 do not have a decocker function on the safety lever, so in order to decock them you actually have to do it manually, which you can do by putting the safety on and then pulling the trigger to decock the pistol, because the safety does not lock the action of the trigger or the hammer. The major change for the Model 31 is the redesigned safety lever. This one has a safety decocker system. However, it does not have the spring-back function of the Megastar and the Ultrastar. You can see the safety lever protrudes a little bit more on both sides, but it has been shortened a little bit as well. These pistols have fixed front sights machined into the slide and a dovetail rear sight. The rear is adjustable for windage with a small screw. The older pistols have a novel sighting arrangement. The front sight ramp is milled out and filled in with white paint, giving you a very tall bar to aim with. The rear sight has 2 dots filled with orange or red paint. The sights have decent contrast, but it's difficult for me to align the front ramp consistently on the vertical plane. The Model 31, though, has standard 3 white dots instead, which I like much better. The grips on these 2 pistols look very similar, but the 30PK grips are made of hard plastic, similar to the original military style, whereas the 31P grips are made of hard rubber. The safety lever on the 31P is also slightly redesigned. It has more usable surface area and feels much beefier. The last mechanical difference is that the 31P has a flared barrel, presumably to improve lockup consistency with the slide. These 2 pistols also differ in frame material and the finish. The alloy frame on the 30PK makes the gun feel very light and modern, easily an equal to the Beretta 92. The 31P is a heavy pig of a gun. Despite being a few years newer, it feels like an antique by comparison. The finish of the 31P is Star's famous Starvel nickel finish, the same as on my M43 Firestar. The flats are highly polished and look phenomenal. The rest of it is pretty rough looking and not much more attractive than a lot of cheap stainless guns of the era, like the AMT backups and automags. My 31P was a lucky find, basically still new in the box and in pristine condition. Like a lot of Star pistols in this country, it was imported by Interarms in the 90s. By the end of the decade, the entire Spanish firearms industry had imploded and Interarms was shuttered. I don't know if the collapse of Spanish gun manufacturing had anything to do with the closure of Interarms, but I like to think it died of a broken heart without a steady supply of pistols from its suave Spanish lover. My Model 30PK, on the other hand, looks like hammered shit because it's probably an Israeli military or police pistol that was surplus to the US after it had become too haggard for even the Israelis to keep using. Here's 2 things to know about the Israelis. 1, they buy just about whatever guns they can get their hands on. Even though there are plenty of domestically produced handguns, apparently when they need some handguns, they just buy batches of whatever is on the market at the time. And number 2, they shoot the absolute piss out of these things. This 30PK was probably over 30 years old by the time it was imported as surplus to the US, and it looks like it was shot and carried daily that entire time. The blued slide still looks, well, not great, but acceptable. The finish is thin and wearing in spots. The finish on the frame is chipping and down to bare aluminum in spots. This doesn't really bother me. I don't collect display pieces, I collect guns so I can shoot them. Unfortunately, the 30PK is just mechanically worn out. Failure to feed. Failure to still also feed. Failure to lock. The extractor is worn so badly that the gun very regularly fails to extract an empty case, and it's had some frequent failures to return to battery. I could probably recondition it with a new extractor and recoil spring, and a fresh magazine wouldn't hurt either, but parts for these aren't exactly common, and they tend to come from other exhausted pistols just like this one. Remember that Star went out of business before, statistically speaking, almost all of my audience was born. Reliability of the 31P out of the box wasn't good, but I gave it a more thorough cleaning and oiling, and after a few mags it started to work perfectly. In my experience, Star pistols are exceptionally reliable and well made, as long as you don't leave them alone with the Israelis for 3 decades. Alright, as for shooting, Star's take on the Wondernine shoots just like everybody else's take on the Wondernine. A nice, thick grip and a decent amount of heft tame what could otherwise be a sort of high bore axis. The lightweight alloy-framed gun doesn't actually seem any snappier than the steel frame, and the feel of it is much better in other ways. The triggers on these guns are better than a Beretta 92, at least. The double action is smooth, and the single action is light, albeit with a lot of mushy take-up. The slide release and mag release are both kind of old school, not the fastest or the easiest to use, but comparable to any metal-framed double-stack auto of the late 20th century. If you're a sucker for Spanish steel like I am, you should definitely consider picking one of these up. The best buy is probably the 30M, the full-size military model. They're readily available and a perfect representative of the whole series. The most desirable is the 31PK, especially in the Starvel nickel finish. That's the most modern and certainly the most impressive from a mechanical and functional standpoint. The Model 31 was actually briefly available in 40 Smith & Wesson, and apparently there are a scant few 31PKs in 40 cal out there. However, the alloy frame may not have been up to the task, so if you get one, just make sure to shoot it sparingly. And as always, try to avoid dry firing Spanish pistols. There are way too many reports of firing pin breakage for me not to take them a little bit seriously. The Model 28, 30, and 31 series pistols were not the pinnacle of Spanish gun design, but they are excellent handguns, and they served as the basis for the Megastar and the Ultrastar, two phenomenal pistols that sent the Spanish firearms industry out with a bang. We'll talk about both of those guns some other time. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to support this channel, you can do so primarily by subscribing so you can watch more videos when they come out. You can also support me more directly and more meaningfully on Subscribestar. There's a link in the video description. See you next time.